What is your deepest, darkest secret? Story 1. In 1996, I was 6 years old, and a friend told me that computer mouse balls were worth as much as gold. Stupidly and with no plan, I stole one from the classroom computer. Our teacher got extremely angry, and I got really scared I'd get caught. He had us all leave the room and go in one by one so that whoever stole it could anonymously put it back. I was too scared that somebody might see, so I didn't put it back. He exploded on us. The next day, I was going to try to secretly return it, but a kid randomly confessed that he was the one who stole it and said his mom went to the store to buy a new one. He stood in front of the class with a written apology and everything. I should have taken a stand and said, "No, Kyle, you didn't steal it, I did." Shameful, anyway. 28 years later, Kyle is a performer at a nightclub. Story 2. Back in the day, I would go to Walmart and Kmart and wipe the hard drives of every PC on display once every 2 or 3 weeks. I did this for a couple of years. I taught a friend to format from the C prompt, and he started doing it too, and he taught someone else. After a while, all the PCs on display at the mega stores across about 20 counties around us were periodically being formatted and erased. Years later, I was talking to a guy who had worked for Walmart for like 30 years, and he was telling me how someone used to format all the PCs in the 2 Walmarts he worked in. He worked in the 2 counties I frequented most. Funny thing was, they actually set up a sting operation to catch the mysterious formatter, and the guy was paid overtime to walk the electronics section as a plainclothes customer for like 3 months and never caught the person. Even though I'm pretty sure I was still formatting the drives periodically. Somehow we missed each other. For the record, I was only blowing off steam and figured that what I was doing was harmless mischief. I've never been in any kind of trouble with the law, and I didn't grow up to be a criminal. But every now and then, when I walk through a PC store, I get the itch. Story 3. Circa 2004. In first grade, I was your typical gifted kid, now turned burnout, of course. I absolutely loved my teacher. One day I arrived to a new face greeting me at the classroom door. This was the first time I'd ever encountered a substitute teacher. This sub in particular was a mean, unpleasant woman who reeked of cigarettes. Within the first hour of class, she told me to be quiet. I had never been in trouble at school before, and those 2 words broke my little teacher's pet heart. Yes, this is my villain origin story. I immediately decided to plan my escape. At lunch and recess, I grabbed my backpack, jacket, and rain boots and walked straight out the front door. I still have no idea how a 5-year-old could walk out the front doors of a school completely unnoticed. Nonetheless, there I was. The world was my oyster. I walked straight home singing, "I'm going home and nobody can stop me," to the tune of Old MacDonald for 4 kilometers. I had done it. I was home free. When I got there, I saw my babysitter's car in the driveway. Filled with panic, I remembered that my little brother had stayed home sick today. Terrified of disappointing my babysitter, I had to make a decision. Return to the substitute teacher or face the confusion of a 20-year-old girl who, in all reality, would have just been stunned. I chose the former and bolted up the hill in our town another 4 kilometers in the pouring rain. Soaking wet, I ran through the side entrance of the school adjacent to the playground, put my bag back in my locker, and sprinted into my classroom. The substitute stared at me for a second. I thought I was caught. After what felt like forever, she barked at me to change out of my rain boots and put on my indoor shoes. I realized that although I must have been gone almost 2 hours, she hadn't even noticed I had left. My first jailbreak and my first cover-up story, both successful missions. I never told a soul about my rainy day adventure. If you're out there, chain-smoking substitute teacher, I hope you found a new career path. Story 4. When I was a child, I managed to get a speech therapist fired. I was in speech classes up until high school, but this happened around 3rd or 4th grade. I don't know what her official title was, but she was not the speech teacher I would see regularly. She was an older woman, probably around her 60s. I believe she was there to examine how well the speech therapy had been going in the district. She had me read sentences with the sounds and letters I struggled with. As this was happening, she mocked me and laughed at me, while telling me I had the weakest tongue she had ever seen. As a child with a speech impediment, I was already self-conscious. But for an adult authority figure to belittle me like that, it made me never want to speak again. Once the school day was over, my mother noticed I wasn't very talkative. Eventually, I broke down and I told my mom about the whole situation. She called the district and threatened legal action. We were notified soon after that the woman had been fired. There was even a phone call between my mom and the woman where she begged my mom for forgiveness so she could keep her job. I suppose none of this is really a secret, just something I don't talk about often. Her own actions are what led to her termination. However, secretly, I do hope I ended that woman's career, as callous as that may sound. You don't mock a child, and you especially don't mock a child for something they can't control. To do so when your career has you working with children shows you're unfit for that role. Story 5. Back in 1990, when I was in 4th grade, my mom would give me my daily allowance, which was a quarter. But what my mom didn't know is that I had a bully who was taking it. It was my math teacher. He would make the entire class put a quarter daily in a jar on his desk to support his drinking habit. If you refused to give him the quarter, he would make you solve 25 extra math problems in addition to the daily math work. And the next day you had to bring him 50 cents. If you still refused, he would make you do 50 extra math problems and so forth. One day, after 3 weeks of giving him my daily allowance, I refused to give him my quarter because I wanted to buy candy. So he made me do the 25 extra math problems, expecting me to give him 50 cents by tomorrow. Since all I would get from my mom was a quarter a day, I knew I wasn't going to get 50 cents from her the next day. And not wanting to face the teacher's wrath and the 50 extra math problems, I cried and faked being sick. My mom, not buying the lie, asked me what was wrong, so I broke down and told her the truth. My mom didn't confront the teacher nor the principal. She went straight to the superintendent, who nicely told her they were going to immediately take matters into their own hands. The next day, the jar wasn't on his desk, and with a scowling face, he told us that a student had tattled about his secret Christmas party fund that he was planning for us. Mind you, it was February, and that he hired a PI because he wanted to know who was the parent and the student responsible. The investigation into his conduct led to his expulsion 3 days later. He never knew it was me who tattled about his Christmas party fund. Story 6. When I was 8, I was with a group of 5 people, including myself, at a summer camp at an elementary school. One of them was my bully, but it was sort of that situation where you hang out with people just to be liked. We were wandering around the halls when someone found a teacher's room that had a bunch of candy in it. Everyone started taking candy and laughing excitedly about how much they got, myself included. Then we heard a staff member coming. I was the only one who executed quick thinking and hid inside a locker with it just cracked open. I knew it wouldn't lock, but I could stay out of sight from the teacher. The other 4 people had to give back all their candy and write the teacher a 2-page personal apology for stealing candy. I was so insignificant I just waited inside the locker for everyone else to leave, holding my breath. They did. I got out of the locker with several fistfuls of candy, unscathed. Looking back, I should have never jumped inside a locker. I could have gotten caught inside if something went wrong, but it was still clever thinking to hide. Story 7. This might probably get buried in the comments, but I was abused by my dad's brother when I was a kid. Repeatedly. He was in college and would sometimes come to our house at lunchtime when my parents would be at work. I would be with my aunt, his sister, who looked after my brother and me. I would take a nap after lunch and would wake up to him doing things to me. I was so scared I would just pretend to sleep, and he would eventually stop. I don't remember how long this went on. I remember my aunt telling me to tell my uncle that I would tell on him to my dad if he did it again. It's a very faint memory. I'm not sure if it did happen or if I just dreamt it. This happened when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. Growing up, I kind of forgot about it, maybe repressed it even. I still see my uncle from time to time at family gatherings. I never told anyone because it was a long time ago, and I'm scared no one would believe me. Also, I do not want to stir up drama within the family if this ever comes out. Lately, it has been eating at me, and I've been trying my best to distract myself from thinking about it. Story 8. For a year or so, I had almost an addiction, as a minor, to sending older men explicit photos. I sent them to maybe around 100 men. I grew up without my dad, so it made me feel great that they were appreciative of me. It felt good to have a man like me. It was a great feeling when they liked what they were seeing, which was always. Many of them stuck around as long as I wanted. It was my decision if I wanted to leave. I wouldn't have to worry as much about them leaving because I was giving them something they wanted. My favorite one was an ER doctor. I also knew guys who were university professors, firemen, you name it. I was close to meeting one of them, in real life, in his car, but he bailed, thank goodness. For about a year before it started with older men, it was guys my age, a lot of them. Then it was guys just almost too old for me, around 19. Quickly it became 20, then 30, then before you know it, 30 was too young. At the end of this, I looked for men around 60 or 70, my dad's age range. Aside from that part of my life, I act very innocent, and people think I am. I doubt they would really believe it if I told them this. Story 9. Well, I don't know about Darkest Secret, but when I was a kid, there was a very large turtle in the woods. This kid in our neighborhood, maybe 6 years old, was intentionally throwing dirt into the turtle's eyes. I told him to stop doing that. What a cruel kid. A few years later, he'd caught another turtle, smaller, and had it in a cardboard box in his garage. He showed it to us. Well, I'd seen what that kid did to turtles, so I went into his garage after dark, stole that turtle, and let it loose in the woods. I later wondered what he thought when he found the empty cardboard box. There was no way that turtle could have climbed out on its own. A few years after that, I, being a young Catholic kid, had my first confession, or one of my first confessions. As you may already have gathered, I'd already developed a pretty insufferable holier-than-thou attitude, so I couldn't think of much to confess. So I told the priest about stealing that kid's turtle. To the priest's credit, I don't remember his exact words, but he was pretty sure God was cool with my bit of eco-warrioring. Story 10. I'm 99% sure I have like 3 different mental health conditions: OCD, anxiety, ADHD. I've done a lot of research on all of them, and I experience all of the symptoms. I was suffering with the symptoms long before I knew what any of those conditions really were, so I know I'm not faking anything. However, I haven't yet had a doctor's official diagnosis, so I don't go around telling people I'm suffering from these things. I did have complications at birth where oxygen wasn't being transported to my brain for a long time, and the doctor stated that I'd have mental complications. But my parents are always super proud to brag that, despite what the doctors told them, he turned out perfectly normal. So that's mostly why I'm keeping it a secret. Also, I'd prefer if people don't treat me any differently. As much as I'd like for them to occasionally accommodate for what I'm dealing with, I know a majority of people would immediately assume I'm just slow, and I don't want that. Story 11. Back in 1994, I was that junior high school kid who got on the tech teacher's good side because I asked a lot of questions and was very interested in all things tech. I spent a lot of time assisting the tech teacher with various computer and device repairs and gained more and more of his trust. One day, while alone in the tech area, I spotted a 3.5-inch floppy on a random cabinet in the tech room labeled Faculty Passwords. And that little voice inside me thought, that's interesting. So I grabbed the floppy disk, downloaded its contents, and proceeded to make my own copy of it. I know what you're thinking. No way in the world would any tech-savvy person ever label something in big, black, permanent marker, Faculty Passwords. But you see, cybersecurity was near non-existent in the 90s. No one could fathom someone doing something inappropriate with technology. I could have been the king of that high school. Indeed, I had those aspirations. One day while in the library, I was absent-mindedly poring over an Excel spreadsheet containing all of the school teachers' usernames and passwords, when the kid at the computer next to me asked what I was doing. So I told him what I was doing, all of it, the disk, the passwords, everything. As kids, nay, even as adults, we try to fit into societal norms. I wanted to be popular, to be noticed. I was suspended for 2 weeks and was never allowed near another computer at the school. Story 12. I fully confess that I was just making jokes online about getting back at someone who hurt me in the past. His name was Joey, and I assure you that if, for some reason, he's no longer with us as of March 10th, 2024, I had nothing to do with it. I will also stipulate, while hopefully providing context, that perhaps there is a small part of me that has fantasized about doing something terrible to Joey in an alternate reality, because he truly did cause me and his younger sister Molly a lot of trauma when we were only 11 years old, combined. Even in my teenage years, almost a decade later, I would get extremely nervous when I heard police sirens, because I knew they came for criminals, and I never stopped feeling like one, for being a victim. I think I was just over 5 when Joey hurt me for the first time. I bet I spent more time wondering if I was different than most boys, because my first experience with intimacy involved things no child should be exposed to. I was only 5, and the game was either I let him touch me or I touched him. I honestly didn't understand or care about identity, but that didn't make it less confusing. If there's one thing I'll always resent Joey for, it's that he made me lie on top of his little sister, who was only 6 at the time, while we were both unclothed, at his insistence. I hate that that was my introduction to what another human body looked like. I turned 40 in August. I almost never give myself credit for how well adjusted I am. I never once, not even a little, gave my mom or dad any credit for me not becoming like Joey because I never told them. They just probably wondered why their kid got weird around sirens out of nowhere. Story 13. I hate visiting my mother at the nursing home. She has had dementia for the past 10 plus years. She has no idea who I am, where she is, or what she is doing. She can't speak and can't eat without someone feeding her. She has lost every bit of functioning except the ability to walk most of the time. She's not even 55 yet. People think I'm her sister because of how young she looks. It breaks something in me every time. I want her to pass peacefully and not continue this living horror. I tell myself I am not God and He has purpose in this too. He has provided for her care and I am grateful. However, it is a different type of grief. I've had to get rid of so many of her things, like she's already gone, because I didn't have space for them. People act like it's such a noble thing to go there. They don't get that I have to fight myself every time and deal with the emotional toll afterward. Story 14. Probably my deepest secret is that I hooked up with one of my closest female friends a couple of times when we were both single. We agreed to never tell anyone, especially not our friend group, and we've remained friends to this day and never brought it up. The thing is, when I met my wife, she is not the jealous type, but she met my incredibly attractive friend with whom I have great chemistry, and she straight up asked me, "So nothing happened between you guys, like, ever?" At the time, I believed that the story of me and the friend was not mine alone to tell. If my friend said we needed to keep it secret, I would honor that. So I said, "Nope, not once." Maybe 5 years into my marriage, she randomly said, "I still can't believe you guys didn't hook up. I kind of think you did and you're just not saying anything." I wouldn't even be mad. But by this time, I couldn't rewrite history. I thought it would just be too jarring for my wife to hear this, and she'd start to question other things. I've always had 2 or 3 close female friends. Maybe she'd assume I slept with them all at some point. Not the case. So I regret it to this day that I didn't say something up front. I don't like having a secret or lie, even though it's relatively minor. Story 15. My mother is a mean, emotionally, and previously physically abusive woman. I am now 55, and the last time I spoke to her was when she showed up uninvited to my father's funeral in 2019. Before that, I had last spoken to her when she left me a hateful, abusive, name-calling, curse-filled message after I hung up on her. I had tried to have a calm conversation and told her that if she began cursing and screaming, I would hang up and that she should never call me again until she was ready to speak to me without yelling. I was in my mid-30s. I recently told my aunt, her sister, that if I saw her homeless in the street, I'd walk right past her. I also told my brother, who's just like her, that when she dies, he'd better bury her and not expect me to contribute. I had years of therapy, and I still suffer from nightmares where she's trying to hurt me. Until she comes to apologize to me, which I doubt will ever happen, I don't care to ever speak to or see her again. Story 16. There's been a huge rift in my family ever since my dad's sister's husband's father passed away in the 90s. I know I could have said aunt's husband's dad or even my uncle's dad, but I wanted to make the relationship clear. My aunt was furious that my family didn't show up. This was long before cell phones were common. She doesn't remember who called us, but she's positive someone did and delivered the news. My parents insist that, of course, we would have gone to the wake and funeral had we known, but nobody ever called us. They didn't talk to anyone about it, none of their kids did, and there was no message on the answering machine. The argument grew as my aunt insisted we were lying, and none of us have spoken to each other since. I took the phone call. I was running out of the house to meet friends when someone called, letting me know and giving me the times. There was no one else home, and I was in a hurry, so I planned on telling my parents when I saw them later, but I forgot. I only remembered when my aunt called, furious at my parents. They asked the four of us, and I lied about it. Story 17. I have a couple in first, second, and third grade. I had the same teacher in special education. She would hit me with rulers and yardsticks daily. Not lightly either. Metal ones were bent, and several wooden ones broke across my back and shoulders. Several times my mom showed the welts and bruises to the principal, and she said that special ed teachers have more leeway in how to handle problem children. I was being hit for not looping my cursive the way she wanted, even though it matched the letters on the wall. Also for not spelling my name right. It's Brian, but she insisted it was spelled Brian. I also couldn't roll my R's the way she wanted. It was Florida. No one does that. And I had a speech impediment. I couldn't make R sounds, only W sounds. I was one of the few white kids, and the teacher and principal were both black. It was also the early 90s. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I'm almost 40 and still have to constantly remind myself that skin color doesn't equal bad people. I also grew up with an openly antagonistic attitude toward teachers and authority. Story 18. When I was in 8th grade, I had some issues with a kid that was 1 or 2 years below me. I'm not proud to say I was a bit of a bully to him, but he also was a bit of a jerk. Either way, I got in some trouble with him at some point. Most of our interactions happened on the bus ride home since we lived nearby. But I guess he eventually moved or started using a different bus. Or maybe this was after I discovered I could walk from school to home. I don't remember which came first. Well, a few years passed, and one day I was walking along school grounds and ended up in a part of the campus that had the climbing ropes and bars that people rarely used. Because of that, it had become a small, semi-kept garden with some fruit trees. I saw a group of guys from 7th grade and up. My school had 2 different uniforms, one for grades 1 through 6, and a darker one for 7th through 12th. I walked toward them, paying no mind, when I passed under a tamarillo tree and saw some unripe fruit on the ground, still green, very tough, and almost as hard as a soft rock or a hard piece of wood. In my crazy boy mind, I decided to throw one. But I took notice of the guys around and aimed for a different part of the lot. It was empty, with broken fencing lying along a wall. The crazy part is, this fence had giant holes, maybe 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters. The fruit fit in the palm of my hand, and I was sure it would go through one of the holes. Well, it didn't. It bounced off the fence and, still with a lot of force and height, it flew directly into the back of someone's head. He turned around after a short scream, and lo and behold, it was the same kid I used to semi-bully. I hadn't recognized him in the new uniform. I immediately noticed as he started crying in pain. After all, this was basically like throwing a rock at someone's head. He looked around in confusion, trying to figure out who did it. Thankfully, since nobody had been paying attention and the fruit bounced at a weird angle, he couldn't identify anyone. The other guys surrounded him, trying to help. I slowly and quietly backed up against a wall and slipped away from the lot. I went back to my classroom and stayed quiet. If he had known it was me, he wouldn't have believed it was an accident. Not with our history. I would have gotten in massive trouble with the school and my parents again. I would have never heard the end of it. Story 19. I went through an emotionally and psychologically abusive childhood, including religious trauma. I used to be humiliated in front of my sister for having stained underwear. I was too afraid to ask my parents about puberty or natural body changes. But one night I had a dream where my sister came into my room and woke me up in a very confusing way. I never knew if it was a dream or not. It felt different from all the others, so I'm still not sure. My mom used to tell me she would seriously hurt me if I ever did anything inappropriate, especially regarding my sister. But I'm pretty sure something was done to me. I was isolated on a farm with no outside contact and no real explanation of puberty. So growing up, I was confused, scared, and overwhelmed with no way to cope with any of it. I still have a hard time processing it. Some strange things happened on that farm, and I still carry a lot of guilt and shame. It was a horrible childhood, and a difficult adulthood too, filled with broken relationships, fear, loneliness, guilt, and self-hatred. One good thing that happened was my relationship with faith. I'm a lot better now. Story 20. When I was a teenager in Mexico, My brother and some friends were constantly getting into trouble at a Catholic school. We weren't bad kids, but this very strict woman had it out for us. She was always bothering us because we liked skateboarding, and she considered us a bad influence. She was a very well-known figure in the school and active in upper-class community events. The local priest didn't like us either. He often called us names and accused us of being troublemakers. But the truth was, we were great students and in good shape from skating. One day we noticed that this woman would often visit the priest at a private residence connected to the church. At first we thought nothing of it. They often worked together on school events. But then one of our friends saw the priest kiss her on the mouth as she was leaving the house. We didn't believe him at first, but he was serious. So we got some disposable cameras and staked out the house for about a month. Eventually we caught her visiting, and from our hiding spot by the window, we could hear sounds that made things pretty clear. We started taking pictures from every angle we could, including when they left. They were definitely involved. We decided to go to the priest first. One of us went to confession and, from inside the booth, showed him the photos. The priest immediately ran out and went home. We followed him and knocked on his door while he shouted at us to go away. We told him that if he didn't want the photos made public or risk his position, he needed to help us out. We proposed that he make us Sunday church helpers and give us 30% of the donations, which wouldn't be enough to raise suspicion with the church higher-ups. As for the woman, we left a copy of the photos in her car and arranged a meeting. We used the situation to ask for recommendations for school and other opportunities. Her husband owned a small chain of convenience stores, and we were allowed to grab whatever we wanted. We got to date her nieces, attend exclusive events, and basically live like kings. But eventually she turned on us, sending her driver to threaten us and trying to intimidate us by saying no one would believe our story. So we told her husband everything. He was upset but didn't take it out on us. We gave him the photos and explained how long the affair had lasted. We never heard what happened to the priest, but we saw the woman once more. She looked bruised and miserable. After that, they both disappeared from the area. We ended up becoming friends with her husband. He helped us out with job references, gave us work, and even supported us after college. At the end of it all, he divorced her and remarried. We never found out what became of her. Story 21. My life has been pretty boring, but my great-uncle did take the lives of 2 people. My entire family, plus a lot of people in town, kept quiet about it because the people involved were widely considered to have brought it on themselves. This was the mid-50s in rural southern West Virginia. My great-uncle was playing cards at a bar late one night against 2 young men in their mid-20s. He won the card game along with some money, and the men got upset. They tried to start a fight with him, but he decided to leave since it was getting close to sunrise. They followed him on his way to a shack in the woods, beat him unconscious, shot him 3 times, robbed him, and even tried to harm his horse, but were unsuccessful. Once he finally regained consciousness, his loyal horse had stayed nearby, and he ended up hoisting himself onto it. The horse rode him back into town. He eventually recovered, and a couple of weeks later, he tracked one of the men down and ended his life. Then he found the other man and used his own weapon against him. He didn't do this because they attacked him, but because they tried to harm his horse and made him watch. Story 22. I don't think this will be considered a secret, but I'm an 18-year-old girl, and I've never really had any romance in my life. Sure, there was this boy I dated when I was like 5, but that doesn't count at all for sure. I've never held hands romantically with someone, never kissed anyone, never had a relationship, and I'm frightened. What if this goes on until I die? I'm craving romance, and I keep seeing my friends in relationships, but I've never actually experienced anything. I am so scared. What if I'm not worthy of love? What if I don't have a soulmate? I've never experienced anything romantic in my life except from watching movies. What if that's the most romantic thing I do in my whole life? Anyway, when I was 16, I just told myself that I was unlovable, and I got over it. But in reality, and man, I wish someone would just love me. And you know the whole stereotype about first relationships. People say it's always going to fail, and there's no way you're going to marry your first. And if you do, your marriage will be doomed. What if I have my first relationship at 30 and it doesn't work out, so I end up marrying at 50, or worse, alone? Anyways, that was more of a vent than a secret. But man, how I wish someone could love me, even if it's not perfect. I really need love, even if it hurts. I know that sounds cringe. Story 23. I wouldn't say it's my deepest, darkest secret, like I don't ever tell anyone, but it was for a long time. I've been pretty blessed for most of my life, so this is probably the worst thing that's happened to me. My dad crossed a serious line with me. He didn't hurt me physically in the way most people might assume, but I could tell he was slowly building up to it. This happened during the years when I was 12 to 15. The first time I realized something was wrong was when I found a video he had recorded of me in my room from the family desktop. After that, it was little things over the years. I tried my best to protect myself. I distanced myself from him, was always hyper aware of what he was doing. For example, he used to come into the bathroom to use the toilet while I was showering. The glass was semi-transparent. So I tried to drape towels along the door so I wouldn't be visible. He yelled at me, accusing me of being inappropriate, and cursed at me. The worst part is when you dislike someone who has hurt you, but you can't escape, and you end up turning that pain inward. And personally, what really scarred me the most was the uncertainty of what had happened. As a child, it's really hard to understand that your parent is doing something wrong. I wasn't even 100% sure the video was of me for reasons I won't get into here. I had no concrete proof until I woke up one time to him crossing the line. You don't want to believe something like that is happening, so your mind protects itself by doubting. I tell people now, and they say with certainty that it was abuse, but I still feel unsure. Even after knowing what happened when I was 15, I still feel like I'm going crazy because for so long I convinced myself I was imagining it. That's what was truly taken from me, my trust in myself. This is something I rarely tell people, or when I do, I never explain the full weight of what happened. I'm afraid they'll think it's not serious enough because it wasn't ongoing or as bad as other stories, but it's getting better. It was once my darkest secret that I never told anyone and that ate me alive. Now I talk about it with my therapist, my friends. I recently spoke to my friend's sister who went through something similar with their father. It's good to have those conversations. Don't let your dark secret eat you alive. Story 24. In 7th grade, I found a purse in a gym locker that wasn't locked. I didn't recognize it as one of my friends or classmates, but I did recognize the law of finders keepers. It didn't have any identifying information in it, just a bunch of makeup that suited my coloring. Sweet. My mom didn't let me wear makeup at that age, so I was super excited about my find and rationalized it was okay to keep it because there was no ID and it wasn't secured. A week later, a classmate noticed the blush in my backpack was very similar to one that she had lost or had stolen. Oh, and that gloss too. Where'd you get it? Well, Walmart, duh. It was Lip Smackers and Wet n Wild and other teeny bopper brands. A day later, the principal called me in and had a more formal interrogation where he asked the same questions. Did I take someone's bag, etc.? At this point, I was too ashamed to own up to it because I actually liked this girl even though we weren't friends. She was one of the nice popular girls. So I figured if I admitted to taking something that didn't belong to me, she'd never want to be my friend, and I'd be socially ostracized even more. Plus, I'd get in heaps of trouble at home. So I doubled down on my lie. Pretty sure the principal saw right through my guilt, but they couldn't prove anything, so I got away with it. That was almost 25 years ago, and every now and then I remember that and feel a little pang of guilt, shame all over again. I'm sorry, Heather. Story 25. Honestly, I used to have a massive secret. I used to guard it fiercely because I was embarrassed and ashamed, because that was how I believed I should feel about myself based on what others would think. It wasn't until a disgruntled ex-girlfriend threatened to go public with my business that I did it myself, owned it, and buried it in doing so. Turned out no one gave a damn as much as I did. Now that it's not a secret, I am more secure about it. Furthermore, I don't have any interest in it either. I guess I'm saying whatever someone's darkest secret is, the chances are it's not that bad, so don't beat yourself up over what others might think. I started my current relationship with full transparency, thinking screw it. If she's put off by this, then she's probably not worth it. That was 3 years, 1 house, and 1 child ago. She was worth it. I have no skeletons in the proverbial closet, or anything else for that matter. Pretty damn liberating. That being said, some people love having a secret, so if you like having something that's just yours, be careful not to deny yourself that privacy. Story 26. I was madly in love with my ex-roommate, but no one knows I'm into men, and I could never tell him. He's such a kind person. He's adorable, and when I looked into his eyes and he looked back, I felt incredibly weak and couldn't help but smile. His smile and laugh made my day, and he was so warm. When he lived with me, I'd pretend my pillow was him every night to fall asleep faster. Just the thought of cuddling up next to him was so calming. He'd wake up earlier than me, so I changed my sleep schedule just to get to talk to him in the morning before he went to work. When we hung out, it felt like the world was so vibrant, and when he left, it felt dull. He was the first boy I've ever had romantic feelings for, and it was intense. I miss him a lot, but he's definitely straight, and there's really no way he could feel the same. I avoid talking to him that much now because it just kind of hurts. I'm over him, but it's hard to be near him. Plus, I don't even know if I'm ready to date a guy. I still have stuff to deal with. He ultimately moved out to get his own place, and it wasn't personal. But when he left, things felt so wrong for a long time. I can't tell anyone any of this. How much he meant to me and how much I miss him being in my life. I wish I could at least tell my mom how much I hurt, but being into men and all, I hope he finds a girlfriend and gets to live a happy life. Because boy, that guy really deserves it. I just wish I could have made him happy too. Story 27. I was raised in an emotionally abusive house and was mostly neglected. My only bullies were my siblings and my mom. No one ever told me that they loved me or were proud of me. I was criticized, ridiculed, and told I was useless. To this day, I believe deep down that everyone feels this way about me. I don't believe that I am lovable. I don't believe that I am worthy of love. I don't think anyone really likes me, just tolerates me. It makes me distrust everyone and their intentions, which really does make me unlikable and reinforces my beliefs. I managed to get married and have kids, and I pour all of my love into them. They are happy and joyful people. I broke the cycle, so I guess I'm content to die knowing that much, even if I never truly feel loved. Story 28. This is going to hurt a lot of people. I am so sorry in advance. In second grade, we all had to present and talk about our most prized possession at school. It was all toys, of course. My good friend had a sick Pokemon collection in a sick Pokemon binder. I don't know how, but I stole it. I hid it in my backpack, and it didn't even get found when everyone's bags were searched. I hid it in a pretty open bush in the middle of the playground, mastermind plan, of course, until I could go home. And it was still there a few hours after I hid it. Anyway, my little dumb brain started to realize that I could never use those cards for playing because she would obviously know that it was her collection. And also, I didn't even know how to play. I also started to get scared of getting caught. My anxiety grew and grew. I don't know if it was the same day or just a few days later, but basically, I dumped the entire collection, card by card, in a swamp not too far, but not too close to my house, to get rid of the evidence. What if they somehow found my fingerprints? Anyway, I felt so relieved. Until a couple of weeks later, when I passed the swamp and the cards were meticulously laying on the grass, dry, looking at me, saying, "They will know." So I picked them up and threw them in a trash can, but not before I first ripped them apart. Once again, I was safe. Story 29. I've only ever felt romantic love and platonic, familial love towards animals. I don't think I've ever loved my family. My family's wonderful, and I care about them. They've always been understanding and supportive. They are literally some of the most reasonable people I know, but I don't care about them any more than the people I sit next to in class. I have always cared about strangers too much, according to everyone around me. But I guess it's because I don't see them as any different than the people I know. This doesn't include people I've dated, but I've also exhibited signs of BPD according to my psychiatrist. So it could also be that. In addition, I've only felt fiery love with one person, and she really hurt me. So I'm not surprised my current relationship is a lot more tame, though I still love him. I also love animals so much. They're just so innocent because they aren't influenced by the same things people are. I'm not afraid of being betrayed, so I find it easier to care about them. I would actually go full protection mode if someone intentionally harmed my dog. She is my friend, Josh's sister. But when it comes to my family, I would be fine with never seeing them again. And I know how much that would hurt them. Story 30. When my sister and I were young, we were very close. Our parents divorced, and she always felt like she had to protect me. She would always include me in most things she did, and we would hang out a lot. When she was around 17 or 18, she started dating her now husband. I was about 13 or 14. He was a little older than her. They met at work. Well, she started growing distant and was always hanging out with him. He would come over and bring liquor, and they would drink and hang out. One day she broke the news to me that she was leaving the week after graduating high school. I was devastated. I didn't want to be left alone to deal with the dysfunction we called home and family. So I, being young, blamed this on her boyfriend. So one day when they were gone, and so was Mom, I was home alone. I got some of my mom's laxatives, just 2, definitely no more than 3. I crushed them up and put them in the liquor he drank. It was Crown, I believe. That night I sat in my room and heard him getting sick and throwing up at the same time. I felt really bad about it, but was too scared to tell anyone. I'm glad he was okay. We ended up being very close until a few years ago. I'll likely take this to my grave. Story 31. One of my aunts, a half-sister of my father, same father, different mother, could actually be my sister, but I don't care to find out. When my dad was 15, he had a relationship with my grandfather's second wife, who was in her 30s. My grandfather basically treated my dad like an adult, admitted defeat, and let a teenage boy move out with his new partner, while also working to support 5 children on his own. The last of those kids might possibly be my older half-sister, since she was born around the time Dad was with that woman. For the longest time, my dad never told me or my mom about that part of his life until his half-siblings came to visit. They didn't think anything bad about him and still respected him. I don't hate the woman, despite what happened, but it does feel awkward visiting them since all but my aunt are aware of the relationship my dad had with their mom. Other than that, there's the fact that one of my cousins allegedly forced another cousin into something very inappropriate and recorded it. Since I don't know the full details and haven't seen proof, I can't say for certain what happened. Story 32. Okay, hold on to your hats. I stole a pair of curtains once. Bear with me, because the crime, though heinous, was done with the best of intentions. It was nearly 40 years ago, and I worked for a fairly prestigious interiors company. The company culture was horrible, with the slightest mistake ending in dismissal, and there was zero understanding or sympathy for anyone. The economy was in rough shape, and no one had any savings. Losing your job often meant losing your home. Head office imposed a new manager on us, and no one questioned why, even though the poor woman knew nothing about our department and received virtually no training. Almost on day 1, she made a terrible mistake that resulted in 2 magnificent pairs of heavyweight lined curtains being misordered and ultimately ending up in our stockroom. Even then, they would have cost around 300 to 400 pounds, a tremendous sum at a time when I earned about 7,500 pounds a year. Anyway, I'll cut to the chase. An inspection was rapidly approaching. Those curtains would be discovered, and Jane was going to lose her job. Every night, to prevent theft, after staff went home, the building was locked up by 2 senior staff members who checked each other. One night, Jane and I were alone together, and we each took a pair of those curtains. Just like in those old mystery novels, it was essential that we both had a pair so that we were equally guilty and couldn't turn on each other. Not that we ever would, but we didn't know each other that well yet. There wasn't a chance in the world that, if caught, we wouldn't have been prosecuted, and management would have delighted in our downfall, especially since we had previously good records. But I felt strongly that I had to help Jane, who really needed that job. No one ever noticed the loss of those decorative treasures because they shouldn't have existed in the first place. There was no customer for them, and they didn't appear on our stock sheets. I've still got those curtains. I have to say, if you're going to take a risk, invest or not invest in really good quality ones. They still look brand new, keep out the cold, match most decor, and because they're huge, fit almost any sitting room window perfectly. Honestly, I've got no regrets. If you're going to borrow something, make it something only the wealthy would normally afford. Story 33. I feel incredibly guilty about this and still regret it. Although I was never punished and no one found out, I know what I did was wrong. I was a teenager and made an extremely poor choice. This is something I've never confessed before. I was a smart kid, always figuring out ways to solve problems. Unfortunately, I used that intelligence in a very inappropriate way. I had a crush on my tutor who came to my house to help me prepare for final exams. I was 13 at the time. What happened was, I made sure she always had water bottles to stay hydrated during the lessons. Earlier that day, I took a tissue box and carved a small hole into it. I tested to see if my phone camera could fit and be hidden. After a few tries, I got it right. I rehearsed the setup and practiced the timing. 10 minutes before the lesson was over, I said I needed to use the bathroom. I placed the modified tissue box and my phone in a specific position to try and record her. I walked back to the study table and finished the lesson. To make her need to use the bathroom, I grabbed a nearly empty water bottle and started shaking the small remaining water around while she was talking. It distracted her just enough, and she eventually went to use the bathroom. I had set everything up, and after she left the house, I went back in and stopped the recording. I watched the footage. I was excited, but after the initial rush faded, the guilt hit me hard. I realized I had violated someone's privacy, and it was completely wrong. I deleted the video immediately and have never spoken of it again. I genuinely regret it and know I crossed a line that I never should have. Story 34. My sister lost her front tooth when she was 4 years old because of me. My mom wouldn't let me go out rollerblading unless I brought my little sister with me. She could barely stay upright, and I was annoyed the entire time. I was impatient, holding her hand, and frustrated because we were moving so slowly. I just wanted to get to my friend's house, and it felt like we'd never get there at her pace. At one point, I forcefully pulled my hand away from her and caused her to lose her balance. She fell flat on her face. I panicked when she didn't get up right away. When I finally ran over and helped her up, her face was covered in dirt and blood. That's when I saw her missing front tooth. She was crying, and I did my best to calm her down. I was terrified that our mom would find out and punish me. So I convinced my sister that she had let go of my hand, and I had been trying to hold on. That's the story we told our mom. She was too young to remember what actually happened. And to this day, that's what she believes. My sister is 35 now. I'm still scared of my mom, and this is a secret I'll likely take to my grave. Story 35. I dated a woman from work for about 8 months. I was head over heels in love with her. She was seeing someone else at the time, but insisted they weren't serious until he got a job in another state and she left with him. She still came back often to visit her kids, and we continued to see each other. I hated it, but I couldn't walk away. This went on and off for 3.5 years. Eventually, I started dating someone else, and that ended the back and forth. But after that relationship ended, she and I reconnected, though nothing physical happened. We kept in touch for another 9 months before she ghosted me again. She always disappeared when the guilt became too much. She eventually married the other guy. We haven't spoken in 2 years. I haven't dated anyone else since, because deep down, I'm afraid of what would happen if she became single again. This is her 3rd marriage. I'm still not over her, and I'm not sure I ever will be. How can I bring someone else into that? The worst part is, I only feel mild guilt, if it's even guilt. I hated the guy because I couldn't bring myself to hate her. As far as I was concerned, he was the one who took her from me, even though he didn't even know I existed. What I mostly feel now is anger at myself for becoming someone I swore I wouldn't be. I've always hated cheating and dishonesty, yet I found myself in that situation with very little hesitation. It gave me a new perspective. I try not to judge others too harshly anymore. You never really know what you're capable of until you're put in that situation. It's amazing how quickly you can justify walking away from your own morals. Story 36. I used to say random things just so I could sit back and watch how people would react. I don't know why, but no matter how they reacted, I would just find it fascinating. I once told an older woman babysitting me and my siblings that I couldn't go outside because I was allergic to the heat. That's how it started for me. I was just being flippant as a 10-year-old. I thought she realized I was joking. I couldn't figure out why. When she loaded us into the car to take us to Dairy Queen, she put her husband's straw hat on me for the walk to and from the car. Also, she ran the air conditioner in the car on full blast, even though she was usually notorious for never turning it on. Everyone else had to go outside regularly, but I was allowed to stay inside and play with Legos or color. It was only when my foster mother showed up to pick us up and the woman reassured her that she made sure I wasn't exposed to the sun and heat too much that I realized she believed my lie. I got in trouble, but honestly, it was totally worth it. I didn't always lie just to trick people. Sometimes I'd randomly state a fact with no context, like saying, water isn't wet, or the Easter Island heads have bodies buried underground that people didn't know about for years. There'd be no lead-in at all. We'd just be sitting silently or near each other, and I'd suddenly say it and then walk off. Watching people's reactions was, frankly, hilarious to me. Story 37. When I was around 14 years old, there was a small shop just up the road from where I lived. I'd walk past it often, buying the newspaper and lottery ticket for my parents, and sometimes a snack for myself. I got to know the owner quite well since we interacted almost daily. One day, he asked me to watch the store while he went to the bathroom. It wasn't the first time he'd asked. Being a young teenager with curiosity and limited access to adult material, I saw it as an opportunity to swipe a magazine from the top shelf. I was fully aware of what was in them and had always glanced that way when I went into the shop. Taking my chance, I grabbed one and stuffed it into my jeans down the side of my leg. The owner finished up, thanked me, and I left quickly. The guilt of what I did was almost unbearable in the following weeks. I'd never stolen anything before, and taking it from someone I knew and who trusted me made it worse. A couple of months later, I walked into the store like usual and pretended to find money on the floor. I handed it to the owner, thinking he'd take it, but he declined and told me it must have been dropped by someone else. It was my lucky day. I insisted, but he wouldn't budge. He said, "If you don't want it that bad, give it to charity." Those words stuck with me. Donating the money would have been a kind of atonement, but I never did it. Story 38. I actually just came clean about mine this weekend. Out of serious fear for my safety and that of my son, I kept something hidden for a long time. I had a child unexpectedly while I was separated from my husband. He may or may not be the biological father. The truth is, I was assaulted by him the same night I had also been with a longtime friend, who is now an ex-friend. My husband never even asked questions. He just told me that if the child wasn't his, he would hurt me. So I stayed silent. This weighed heavily on me. I'm not a dishonest person, and keeping this secret tore me up inside. I had a full mental health crisis, and about a week ago, I was discharged from a 2-month stay in a residential care facility. The crisis began when I found out I was pregnant and started dealing with the emotional threats from my husband. My mother encouraged me to return to him, which only made things worse. My therapist and psychiatrist both told me that I should not go back to live with him and that I'd need a safety plan for my child and me if I ever disclosed the full truth. It was a condition of my discharge that I could not return to that environment. During visitation, he came to see me and acted like he was being affectionate, but left fingerprint bruises on my leg and whispered a threat if I ever talked about what happens at home. I immediately reported it to my therapist and doctor. He was removed from my visitation list. It's not something I'm proud of, but it was something I had to do for our safety. I'm still trying to process it all. Story 39. I rented an apartment in NYC, and there was a problem with the patio door. It wouldn't close properly. So imagine in the dead of winter or during a rainstorm, it would be so darn cold. Management wouldn't do anything about it, so I stopped paying rent. After 4 months of not paying, management changed and a new person took over. She came to my apartment and said I needed to pay. I told her I understood, but pointed out the door. It was freezing or extremely hot in there. I said that if they fixed it, I'd pay back what I owed, minus 1 month of rent for the inconvenience, which was $2,500. They agreed. Another 2 months went by before they finally fixed it, and then asked me to pay. I asked if they could send me an online bill showing what I owed. Due to some internal mix-up, they only billed me for 2 of the 6 months I missed. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything, and I paid it. I basically made about $7,000 from that. I had to deal with a broken door, but $7,000 felt like enough compensation. I bought a home a couple of months later. My mortgage company noticed I hadn't paid rent every month and questioned it. I explained that I didn't pay because of the broken patio door and that the management company agreed to it. They reached out to confirm, and I called the office every day to ask them to send a letter verifying the situation. They eventually did. I got approved for the mortgage, received my deposit back, and everything turned out okay. Story 40. Not a secret technically, but here it is anyway. Back when I was just a kid who didn't fully think through my actions, we went to the Isle of Majorca for a few days with my family. Our days were like every other summer vacation. swimming at the pool, going to the beach, feeling the sun warm our skin. The usual. One afternoon, while we were wandering the island, we decided to go shopping. I honestly can't remember what my family bought, or even if they bought anything at all. But one thing I remember very clearly was a ceramic cup. It had a lighthouse on a beach formed realistically on it. And what do you think my child self did just as we were about to leave the store? I grabbed the cup off the shelf with my right hand while holding my dad's hand with my left. We walked straight out of the store without anyone noticing, not even my family. That night I cried and felt so guilty. I remember saying, God doesn't want me to steal. My dad ended up pretending to make a phone call to the store to ease my crying. So, technically, I'm still a thief. Story 41. When I was about 4, we went on a family vacation with my dad's college roommate and his family. In their family, the oldest son was a huge Star Wars fan and had the original Darth Vader action figure carrying case with all the figures, all the accessories, everything. He was a total jerk to both me and his younger brother, who was also around 4, and wouldn't let us play with his awesome toys. So, we waited until he went out on a fishing trip. Then we snuck the action figures down to the beach, where we spent the afternoon throwing them into the water, burying them in the sand along with their tiny weapons and cloaks, and even burying the case itself. We peeled off all the stickers once they got too sandy and wet. When the older brother came back, he was completely heartbroken. My dad even broke out his metal detector to try to find them, but the original Kenner figures were 100% plastic, so he had no luck. I'd be surprised if more than 70 to 80% of the figures and accessories were ever recovered. If those had stayed in mint condition, I'm sure they'd be worth thousands today. Story 42. One of my old jobs still believes that I left on good terms because I had to take care of a cousin for a few months before getting rehired by them. In reality, I was encouraged to look for another job because there was a real chance I might be fired. I agreed to try one more week, but I found another job that would hire me the following week. I gave my 1-week notice to my old boss, who decided to just fire me on the spot. I ended up working at a pickup truck shop on weekdays and boats on weekends. Eventually, I decided I didn't want to be there anymore, so I applied for a job in a field of mechanics I had never even considered. I knew enough about electricity to survive in a shop and was willing to learn. They only ever brought up the cousin once, asking which cousin it was. I had made him up completely, said he was from my dad's side. I was laid off before finding my next job, but during that first shop, I was in a deep mental state of apathy about my life and career. I was seriously debating if I even wanted to be a truck mechanic again after burning out from my previous shop. I took a year or two away, worked on forklifts, and then came back. It turned out to be the best decision I ever made, and I thank God that man fired me. It gave me the push I needed to learn and grow. But yeah, that job has no idea I was basically destined to be let go. Story 43. In about a built-up teenage anger from years of neglect, bullying, abuse, betrayal, and more, I ended up scarring someone for life. Then I lied in court to avoid losing my parents. There was no further evidence, and I was only given a warning. I don't know why I lied. My parents were half the problem. Maybe it was because the alternative felt even worse. The pain you know you deserve hurts way more than the pain others inflict on you. Especially in hindsight, knowing that if I had just managed to push through another year or two, I'd have been okay. I was born autistic, with a father who didn't believe it existed, and a mother who was also autistic but lived in fear. I didn't get the care I needed. Instead, I was beaten, yelled at, commanded, bullied, used, and completely abandoned. Everyone insisted there was nothing wrong with me. Little kids can often see what adults and school psychologists miss, and both can end up being cruel for entirely different reasons. My father eventually got the treatment he needed for his own disorders, and now things are half decent. But I'm messed up for life. I've had the therapy I need to function, mostly, but while others avoid conflict to keep the peace, I can't do that on certain vital issues anymore. I wish I could take back what I did. Honestly, if someone did the same thing to me, I'd be fine with that. It would hurt less.